Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we're diving into a historical anomaly that completely defies logic. We are talking about the exceptionally rare phenomenon of Egyptian pharaohs who somehow managed to become literal, living gods while they were still breathing. I mean, really think about it. How does a regular mortal ruler actually convince the entire world that they are a living deity? It's a question that challenges absolutely everything we understand about power. And yet, for a very select few in the ancient world, it was an absolute reality. Here is the roadmap for this explainer. We're going to cover 1. The mortal shell, 2. Gods among the living, 3. Paths to divine status, 4. High-status deity associations, and finally, 5. Queens and Ptolemaic shifts. Let's jump right in. Starting off with section 1, the mortal shell. Let's look at the actual physical reality of these kings. We gotta ground all these lofty concepts in stark, physical reality. Take Ramesses II, for example. Despite his unmatched earthly power, his mortal shell was incredibly fragile. When he was discovered by locals back in 1871, his body had been hastily hidden in a royal cache known as TT-320. Ancient priests literally had to rewrap him in plain linen and stash him in a simple wooden sarcophagus just to protect his remains from tomb robbers. And honestly, this brings up the ultimate irony of our whole story. While his massive monuments were out there proclaiming his eternal invincibility to the world, modern medical reappraisals tell a very different story. This so-called living god likely suffered from crippling physical ailments like severe arthritis. Right behind that divine, untouchable facade was just a fragile, aging human being in pain. Moving to section 2, gods among the living, and just how incredibly rare lifetime deification actually was. So how exactly do we get from mortal frailty to divine invincibility? Well, it was actually standard practice for pharaohs to be worshipped as transfigured ancestors after they died, sure. But lifetime cultic devotion? That is a fundamentally different ballgame. It meant treating a still-breathing human being as a literal deity perfectly equal to the ancient gods. So just how rare are we talking? 2%. That's it. Out of the hundreds of indigenous pharaohs who ruled Egypt over millennia, only 4 are definitively confirmed to have achieved this ultimate status while alive. And interestingly enough, all 4 established their worship in Nubia. It was a statistical anomaly reserved strictly for the absolute pinnacle of achievement. Which brings us to section 3, paths to divine status. How did they actually earn this godhood? If we look at the track record for guys like Senusret III, Tutankhamun, and Ramesses II, the path to godhood was paved in blood and diplomacy, extraordinary military merit. But Amenhotep III is a really fascinating exception here. He wasn't a warrior pharaoh at all. His justification was purely political, leading Egypt into an unprecedented golden age of peace. Also, notice the key difference in their personal lives. Amenhotep and Ramesses extended this divinity to their spouses, while the others stood alone. You see, this wasn't just some arbitrary ego trip. It was actually a strictly meritocratic achievement. Think about it. Just as a valiant soldier or a clever scribe could work their way up the ancient Egyptian ranks, a pharaoh, who already held the absolute highest mortal office, only had one direction left to climb. Self-deification was essentially the ultimate form of upward mobility, a promotion on a cosmic scale. Let's pivot to section 4, high-status deity associations. Basically, how did they choose their divine form? There are some really fascinating nuances when they picked their divine associations. The absolute highest status you could grab was Amun, the supreme king of the gods. But they approached him differently. Tutankhamun claimed to be the literal, physical incarnation of Amun on Earth. Ramesses II, on the other hand, associated heavily with Amun but deliberately kept his own distinct, personal identity right alongside the god. Then you've got Senusret III, who goes in a radically different direction. He aligned himself with Sekhmet, the fierce lioness warrior goddess. In fact, hymns from the time boast that he, quote, shoots the arrow like Sekhmet. What makes this so incredibly unique is the gender non-identical pairing. Scholars actually believe this association with a traditionally masculine acting goddess might represent a really fascinating form of ancient gender fluidity within the royal cult. And what about our political exception, Amenhotep III? Well, he associated himself with the Aten, the literal visible solar disk in the sky. While the Aten was traditionally a slightly lower status god, Amenhotep utilized a highly nuanced theological program to become the dazzling Aten.
He positioned himself as the living embodiment of all Egyptian gods on earth.
And this right here is a massive turning point in history. Around year 30 of his reign, Amenhotep III initiates his self-deification. This wasn't an isolated event. It laid the direct theological foundation for his son, Akhenaten, who took the throne in 1351 BC. Akhenaten famously launched Atenism, a radical religious upheaval that completely upended Egyptian society. It was literally the ultimate culmination of his father's carefully laid divine groundwork. Let's look at Section 5, Queens and Ptolemaic Shifts. How did spousal co-deification evolve over time? Because, deification wasn't just a solo act. It expanded to royal spouses, and the rules completely transformed over the centuries. During the indigenous pharaonic era, elevating a spouse to godhood only happened about half the time. It was reserved for immensely powerful queens like Tai and Nefertari. But fast forward to the Greek-ruled Ptolemaic kingdom, living couple deification became the absolute, unquestioned standard. The Ptolemaic Dynasty fundamentally changed the game. Their imperial cult started with the posthumous worship of Alexander the Great, but soon rulers like Ptolemy II utilized incest to closely associate the royal family with the gods and lock in this dynastic cult. By the time of Ptolemy III, worshiping the living royal couple was set in stone. Deification was no longer a meritocratic prize earned through genius. It was a rigid mechanism of imperial control that lasted for generations, ending only with the famous Cleopatra and her son. Which leads us to our final section, conclusion, mortal ambition and eternal myth. Let's bring this whole thing full circle and look back at the physical legacy of these incredible rulers. Because for all their monumental propaganda, for all their claims to literally be the sun itself, behind the eternal myth of the living god was always a fragile mortal shell. Just like Ramesses II, they were men who aged, ached, and eventually died, relying on panicked ancient priests to hide their bodies in caves just to survive the harsh reality of history. So it leaves us with this really profound question about human ambition. Is ultimate power found in unmatched military might, in creating an era of political peace? Or is it simply the sheer audacity, the ability to look at one's own fragile mortality and decide to rewrite the rules of the universe to become a god? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the narratives handed down through time, and I'll catch you in the next one.